But to kick off, today I want to speak to you about the future of urban transportation and how we as Uber envision this. A lot of you might understand the story of Uber and how we came about, but I think before we get to the future, we always need to think about what happened before and how we actually got to this point. So Uber actually began with both our founders, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, standing on the street, very similar to this gentleman here, trying to hail a cab, but nobody knew that they were trying to do that. They waved their hand, and there was this blur of taxis and vehicles. So many, but nobody knew. They just wanted to get from where they were to their hotel. And that's how the concept of Uber was actually born. It was about the simple theory and boiling this down to first principles, which is connecting not just devices, but connecting reality. And the reality that we were trying to connect is people, cars, and mobile phones through the mobile internet to enable movement and to enable freedom for people. And that's where this simple concept started. But the place that it happened was a city, and cities are extremely important for us as human society. Today, more than 50% of our population live within cities. And by the year 2030, 60% of the population will live in cities. Now that's a lot of people. Now, this doesn't just make life better, but it also makes life worse. We have more congestion. You have a lot more people buying cars. You have a lot of pollution that comes along with this. And this is actually the fundamental problem or the truth that Uber has envisioned to solve, is reducing this congestion, reducing the amount of things that we need to get from point A to point B, as in your car. The World Health Organization estimates that approximately 7 million people die premature deaths due to urban congestion. That's quite a lot of people. So through this transformation of urban transportation, Uber has connected not just devices, as I mentioned, but connected reality. And we've done this extremely quickly to make cities a lot better. But this is not the start. Before I talk about the innovation that we've come along across this journey, I want to talk through the growth story. So this is Uber in year 1, year 6.5, and today where we are today, which is year 8.5. In the first year, we started off with a product to connect these realities, which was Uber Black. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this product. It's very exclusive, very premium, but it didn't provide people with real access to transportation. And this is where we introduced UberX, which is the product that everybody knows and loves today. And we moved from doing approximately 1 million trips to 1 billion trips in just 6.5 years. Today, we've done approximately 10 billion trips. And this is through the innovation of connecting the existing assets and utilization of these assets with people and using the mobile internet. So of course, this is not just done with UberX and Uber Black. We've brought on quite a few other products. But the products that we bring on need to become a lot more efficient. And Uber Pool was one of the great innovations of Uber to do this. So to move beyond this, we found a way using data, advanced algorithms, and of course, vehicles and people to connect people on a particular journey. So you don't need multiple journeys. People do this already. It's just not that efficient. Think of the situation where carpooling actually happens at work, and you group up as a bunch of individuals living in the same neighborhood saying, well, I work at MTN and so do you, so why not carpool? Well, then you have this issue of somebody not being on time. It never really works out. It's always great in theory, but we found a way for it to work, not just in theory, but in reality. So beyond this sharing economy and Uber Pool as one of the innovations, we've also brought on autonomous vehicles to be a part of this pooling scenario and the general Uber use case. And this is a way in which we envision us reducing the cost so that we can always enable the masses to be able to move. And I know there was a discussion earlier on around what are we going to do about the people currently driving these jobs. I think that's a great debate, and I'll be outside if anybody wants to continue that with me. The autonomous vehicles that we have today are currently live. And this technology is moving at a rapid pace. We've currently driven approximately 1 million autonomous miles to date. So the feeling of this is in the future, as you mentioned previously, the future is now. The technology is available. It's just about people's readiness to be able to accept this in their daily lives. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I think we'll definitely get there, and that's a journey that we're on. Now, moving on to the next revolution in this urban transportation system, which is our new product, UberAir. But before I get there, I always need to take a couple of steps back and shift industries completely and actually shift time spaces. If you had to think about cities, which is what we're trying to revolutionize in terms of the way people move, there's also buildings within these cities. And if you had to take a look back in terms of how these buildings were put together, like Johannesburg in the 1900s, everything was very different. Things were flat. And people started thinking about how do we actually leverage the space above us? Now, today this might seem as, well, it's just another tall building. But back then, it wasn't. And through this revolution of building above and higher, which came about through the invention of elevators, etc., Johannesburg CBD now looks like this today, making the population a lot denser, bringing people closer together, and facilitating a lot more economic activity and also social activity, bringing people closer together. We've thought about things similarly, as in you use your car today to move around your city, but what about using the space above our heads? And I know everybody's thinking right now, flying cars. Well, no. We did think about that, but the car in a flying situation didn't exactly work. So we've thought about the vehicle in a different way. And this is our one of our first prototypes of an electronic vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. It looks a bit strange, and I love that it feels that it fits in with a futuristic view. It's a combination between a helicopter and a traditional airplane. That's exactly what this eVTOL is. But this is going to change the way in which people are moving today. And the reason for that is we no longer have to think about getting from point A to point B in a congested street. We can now leverage and access the air above us. And the fact that it's electric makes it more sustainable. The fact that more people can fit in this than a traditional car makes it better than moving in your car. And that's something I'm really, really excited about. This vehicle can travel at up to 320 kilometers per hour. That's twice the speed of the cow train. It can get you from Johannesburg CBD to Pretoria without the need for a charge. And I know everybody has a massive fear about when the Tesla comes out in South Africa, where am I going to charge this? So we started thinking about how would this fit into society today? And how would this fit into cities as they're an important part of human development? And the concept of a skyport came about. So this is leveraging existing spaces and assets that we have across the globe. And this is not just relevant for the developed world. Because we're in Africa today and Uber exists. I have no doubt that in the future, these types of structures can be built in different shapes and forms across the African continent, which I'm really passionate about. So imagine flying here, going down to the basement, hopping into your autonomous Uber vehicle, and getting home. You won't have to spend an hour in traffic. You won't have to stress out about what are you going to do with that time and the time that you've actually lost, because you'll now start to become more productive. And the end goal for this is not to make it extremely expensive and to have it so that the millionaires and the guys are living in Waterfall Estate, no offense to anybody who lives in Waterfall Estate here, to be able to afford this, but we want to make this cheaper than traveling with your own car. And that brings me to the point of what is Uber's ultimate vision and who do we see as our competition? It's not actually the other ride-hailers. It's not the meter taxis. It's actually your personal transport. But we don't want to compete with what you're doing. We want to integrate. So you could still use the train, hop on a skyport, get into your car or an Uber, but ultimately have a more seamless journey that's more cost-effective, more efficient, safer, and brings people closer together. Now, I know what I've spoken about comes across as something that's quite a far reality. But in actuality, it's not. Because the first launch of UberAir and the Skyport terminals will be in 2020 in Los Angeles and Dallas. And you might sit there thinking, well, that's the US. Stuff that happens there takes a really long time to make it to Africa. And where are you going to put a skyport in Lagos? Well, just to put things into perspective, Uber came to Africa 5 years after it launched in the US. And that's just not 5 years in Johannesburg, because it came here 3 years after we launched in the US. But after 5 years in launching in the US, Uber was available in Lagos, in Accra, in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, in Kampala, in Nairobi, and in Tanzania. These are places where these types of technologies generally don't reach there quick enough. But we want to bring these types of technologies in a scalable way to Africa and other developing economies. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, because it's not just about specific segments or markets enjoying these awesome technological feats, but it's about everybody having access to this. For example, in the US, you might jump into an UberX, which is a Jaguar. In Kampala, you might jump into an UberX, which is a 15-year-old Toyota Carina. It's a completely different experience, but the technology is the same and people are still benefiting from it. And I'm not saying we may have the same eVTOL vehicles in Kampala or in Nairobi and Johannesburg. They might take a different shape or form, but we're working towards this vision of changing the entire supply chain. Right now, aircrafts are just being built for long-haul flights. And the production capacity isn't really that high, but we're working with a lot of partners with the likes of Embraer, Boeing, Airbus, etc., to change that and to change the actual supply chain and the manufacturing of these vehicles to increase that. And with that will come lower costs, which will then provide a much greater access to the rest of the world. Before I conclude, I want to share a video with you all in terms of how this would be a part of your daily lives. I think it's really important because these pictures that I've shown, and as much as I think I can describe things really well, I feel like this video really captures what our lives could be in the future, which is not so distant. Now, I hope that inspires you to go back to your businesses and really feel like you can be a part of this change that is already happening and that you'll make it a reality, because I'm pretty confident it's going to happen. Thank you.